This video is in described video. If you would like to see the version of this video without audio description, please visit the link below. Fade to a shot of an old black and silver computer. This is a generic desktop computer that you would probably find in a library, school, or office. They are common and numerous on the used market because after a couple of years of their release, they usually get replaced in the mass. As a result, the old ones usually end up being sold on eBay or Kijiji, going from reseller to reseller. Eventually, they end up in the hands of normal consumers like you and I, sold for pretty cheap. The computer has a Windows 7 and Intel i5 sticker on it. For many, we probably use these computers when we wanted to try new things like install Linux. Or perhaps we had to use it for all of our games because we couldn't afford to get a real computer for gaming. The Mobile Museum intro plays, and then transitions to a shot of the computer standing up vertically. These computers are a bit more special than their boring appearance would suggest. This model in particular is the HP Compaq Pro 6300 small form factor PC. I got it for cheap. A gloved hand plugs in an Xbox controller to the old desktop computer, now set up with a monitor, mouse, and keyboard. A lot of people use these machines to do their gaming. In fact, gaming on a super low budget is nothing new, but what is different about this computer is that it wasn't originally designed for gaming. The gloved hand then opens and closes the CD drive. This can clearly be seen as it is not designed at all for things as simple as adding a common graphics card. These desktops are famously difficult to upgrade, only supporting low-profile graphics cards. A web page is shown, which is a product page for a graphics card. A GTX 1050 low-profile graphics card would actually turn this PC into quite a decent gaming machine. However, getting that graphics card is really a band-aid on a larger problem. The web page lists the card as being rated for 70 watts and recommended for a 300-watt computer minimum. This is because beyond that, there isn't usually much else that you can upgrade, and that graphics card is really expensive for what it is. If you got a good deal on an old office PC like this, it would likely cost twice as much to make the upgrade to a 1050. An eBay webpage is shown with a similar looking computer being configured for around $169.99. In terms of other upgrades, the motherboard doesn't support many CPUs, and even if you do upgrade it, it isn't a huge improvement for the money. You could upgrade the RAM, but unless you have less than 8 GB, chances are it would not make a huge difference in most games where your 1050 or the CPU would still be the limiting factor. The gloved hand opens the computer and removes its RAM, then examines it. Upgrading the RAM is really where the problems with this PC's expandability begins. Upgrading the RAM for these PCs is pointless because they usually use DDR3, which is quite outdated at this point. That means that you would be investing money in a standard that would lose its value really quickly. A similar thing can be said about the graphics card. The money you would need to spend on the graphics card would be more than a normal GTX 1050 because it would need to fit inside the case. The gloved hand then attempts to install one of the low-end video cards into the computer, only for it to be too large. And those cards are more difficult to find and more costly. Sure, you could simply cut a hole in the case with an angle grinder, but I doubt most people would. Plus, if you're cutting a hole for your massive graphics card, you might need to upgrade the power supply while you're at it, which would cost extra and require another hole. Another factor going against the small form factor graphics card upgrade is that for someone constrained by cost, you'd be losing an awful lot of value during the resale of the card. What I mean is that you will lose the extra money that you spent for a shorter, low-profile card because people on the used market don't usually buy the graphics card for its size, but rather for the chip that's on the inside. The gloved finger points to a label on the computer's power supply, which reads that it is rated for 240 watts. It wouldn't make sense to really upgrade anything. That being said, why is this computer so important for gamers and the PC community, as I mentioned earlier? The gloved hand replaces the lid on the desktop. Gaming has gone astray. A transition plays to a game being played called Faster Than Light. The game has simple graphics and is being played on the desktop. This PC brings us back to our roots of playing old games that were simply fun. They had to be fun because if they weren't fun, they wouldn't sell anything. Games now release a trailer and everyone proceeds to pre-order it because it looks fun and it looks pretty. In the end, we get games like Watch Dogs Legion being used to benchmark, but no one ever plays the game because it's simply too repetitive and not fun. A review aggregate website called Metacritic is shown with the user reviews of Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs Legion displayed. Several reviews highlighting how disappointed the users were with the games is shown. We get games that are buggy and incomplete because of these pre-orders as well. Cyberpunk is infamous for this, but the original Watch Dogs was also known for not fulfilling its promises. This PC doesn't allow these things to happen, because whatever game that you play on this computer, it will have to be at the lowest graphics. You buy games knowing that they won't look good, so you don't buy them for how good they look. You also probably wouldn't be buying games right away, too, because some cost the price of the entire computer. As such, you'll have enough time to know how good the game is and how the developer and publisher treats their fans and customers. This is CSGO running on the PC. A first-person shooter taking place in a desert environment is shown. The game is labeled as Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It is around 40 FPS or so. I would say it's playable for casual players. It can obviously play games like Monaco, What's Yours Is Mine, a personal favorite. A 2D arcade-looking game is shown with lots of vibrant colors but also is visually very dark. Or other indie titles such as FTL, Faster Than Light. These games have such solid gameplay, unique art styles, but can be often off-putting for new players. The game changes again to a game called Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime, which has cartoon characters, amicable animations, a bright vibrant color scheme, and it takes place in space. However, for owners of this computer and computers like it, these types of games would be the only things they can play. What I am trying to say is that there are so many games forgotten by time, underrated, or simply just good games that gamers would miss by only keeping up with the newest games that everyone talks about. Not to mention all the games that could be emulated, if you're into that. The subject then changes to two game consoles. A white game console on the left, which is large, with two controllers propped against it, and a smaller handheld one on the right with two screens and in clear plastic. It is a similar idea as to what Nintendo does with the DS and Wii. Rather than focusing on the technical prowess of a console to compete, they put out weaker, less advanced consoles with really great games. When people play Pokemon or Mario Kart, they don't play because it looks good, they play because it's fun. We as gamers are supposed to play games first because they are fun, because they take us away, because they inspire happiness, and if I may, because they spark a joy. The shot switches back to the desktop with it running Left 4 Dead 2, a first-person shooter with lots of zombies and violence. It seems we have forgotten that. There are many ways that this theory currently exists in gamers though. An example that I found was with the AMD Athlon 3000G as featured in the famous Low Spec Gamer YouTube channel. A video from the Low Spec Gamer YouTube channel is played. The video plays benchmarks of various new game titles that have their graphic settings significantly reduced. He was able to find some very creative ways to get games to run on that modest APU. Much of what I have just said applies to the users of that chip. The chip's price and accessibility causes masses to enjoy the best of PC gaming. They lose out a lot on graphics, but are also not distracted by deceptive new releases that underperform, and I think that is a worthy trade. A transition plays. It leads to shots of the desktop close up, displaying the different selection of ports available on the machine. The point of this video is to say that these small form factor business machines, whether it is a Dell Optiplex, Lenovo ThinkCentre, or HP Compaq PC, or some other device with only integrated graphics, allows this budget approach to gaming to really bring out the best in games. Back to a shot of the computer playing Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime, where the person in gloved hands pilots a spaceship battling against a humanoid monster. That's not to say that beautiful graphics in games are bad, but simply that people are often too fixated on it. They can't see the forest for the trees. They often buy the games because they simply look good and are often not as fun as they appear, pun intended. Good graphics can really make an already good game great, but will not make a bad game better than it is. The game then switches to Counter-Strike Global Offensive, with the gloved person using a sniper to shoot down terrorists. It seems like the feeling that exists in gaming now is, since I bought this new console or new graphics card, I want to play the most intensive games. Because if I paid for the full speedometer, I will damn well use the whole speedometer. People who game on these crappy iGPU computers are more resistant to this idea, though. The gloved hand closes the internal components of the computer. They can be seen as the purist who are not distracted by the glitz and glam of these new games. There isn't anything wrong with people who started out like this with these low-spec machines, or even game like this on a regular basis. The gloved hand turns on the computer by pushing the power button. Then, it promptly starts up, which is something that's really great about PC gaming. In fact, I know people who game even more than me, who use these business machines, but aren't willing to spend more on a new computer, because they see gaming more of a small hobby. The camera pans to the bottom right of the screen, which has a watermark that prompts the user to activate Windows. They want to spend less money to play games, and more money on the games themselves. Or perhaps they are simply satisfied with the gaming experience they already have, just as it is, even if it means their games look a bit like garbage, because to them, it really is the gameplay that matters. Camera passes by the peripherals that are beside the desktop computer. They are very generic and mundane. Then a transition plays. Next week on Mobile Museum, a thin, boxy black Apple phone is briefly shown. Phone that had to follow up with the legendary iPhone 4S and 4, a breed of phone that is seemingly lost to time. It's definitely a blast from the past, even if it isn't as good as it used to be. Fade to black.